And so this next story really caught my attention, and it's been all over the place in the news. But I'm going to read this site called Futurism.com's article about it, just because I thought the wording was kind of funny. But before I begin, just to give you some context, there's this neuroscientist or neuroanatomist who recently published a paper about how she believes that certain kinds of dinosaurs may have been at least as intelligent as primates, which is kind of mind blowing. And I think the way she came to that conclusion is by looking at extant birds, living birds, and how big their brains are, how many neurons they have, and then from there trying to extrapolate based on a specific dinosaur's anatomy, how big their brains may have been or how many neurons they may have had. And so it's a fairly controversial opinion, I guess. So keep that in mind going in. And so the article is dated January 10th and it's by Frank Landemore. And it's entitled In Terrifying News, Big Brain T Rex May Have Been As Smart as Primates. That's scary. And so if I jump a bit down, the heading says Clever Girl, which I think is a nod to Jurassic Park, right? The Tyrannosaurus rex was the apex of all apex predators in its heyday over 65 million years ago, known more in pop culture for its ferocity than its smarts. But according to a new study, we may have been underestimating how intelligent these towering tyrants were this whole time. A lot of alliteration there. And then it continues. In fact, compared to the intelligence of their peers, the T Rex and other theropods, three clawed bipedal dinosaurs, may have been the, in quotes, primates of their time, said neuroscientist Susanna Herculano Huzel, I think it is, author of the study published in the Journal of Comparative Neurology, in a video about her research. According to her findings, theropods had as many neurons in their brains as monkeys do today, with the T Rex boasting quote unquote baboon like numbers of up to 3 billion neurons. That's a pretty scary level of intelligence for a killing machine the size of a house. With that many neurons, a T Rex wouldn't have just possessed uncanny cognition. It also might have lived longer, up to 40 years, Herculano Huzel estimates. That's enough time and smarts to potentially be a social creature with its own culture like primates and whales, and also suggests they may have worked together too. The ability to use tools is even on the table, though with their infamously stubby arms, that seems less likely. And I know the idea of dinosaurs using tools sounds absolutely ridiculous. I'm imagining what they mean is really rudimentary quote unquote tool use. Like, I think there's some birds that will say grab an oyster or something like that and bang it off a rock to open it. So they probably mean something like that, you know? I think some of the smartest birds alive are the corvids, the crow family. I think ravens are supposed to be really smart. Yeah, I'm looking at one article from science.org. Oh, and this is actually crows. Without any training, 78% spontaneously picked up sticks placed in their enclosures and used them to extract food from crevices in pieces of wood. And that actually reminds me of chimps. You know, chimps are said to use tool use as well. Chimps will supposedly take a stick or twig and stick it into an anthole or termite mound, and then they'll pull it out and eat the insects off of the stick. But the article actually has a tweet from the scientist in question, Susanna Herculano Huzel. I think Huzel, I don't know. Hopefully I'm not butchering it. And it says it's officially news. T Rex had baboon like numbers of brain neurons, which means it had what it takes to build tools, solve problems, and live up to 40 years, enough to build a culture! Exclamation mark. And that tweet is dated January 5th, by the way. And then down lower, it gets into once again how she calculated this, supposedly. So the heading says bird brained. Without any theropod brains lying around, soft tissues like gray matter are rarely fossilized. Determining an accurate neuron count of an extinct animal relies on the brains of its modern descendants, birds. And here's a quote: "If you can figure out how many neurons go into a bird brain of a certain size, and you can figure out what size was the brain of different bird-like dinosaurs," Herculano Houzel explained, "then you can do the math and estimate how many neurons a dinosaur brain had." That math is relatively simple. Instead, the difficulty lied in establishing that the brain size proportionality in birds also applied to dinosaurs, and then in quotes, "which is what I just did," she declared. But as an essential tenet of her work, Herculano Houzel maintains that theropods must be treated as a discrete group, with its own distinct traits, rather than thinking of dinosaurs as a homogeneous whole. From that assumption, Herculano Houzel, take a drink, realized that theropods in particular had a similar correlation between body mass and brain size to pre-impact birds or basal birds. From there, she used the neuron count of modern birds, like emus and ostriches, and applied the same rules of scaling to figure out how many neurons theropods like T-Rex may have had. It's a huge revelation if it holds up, and it makes you marvel at how drastically our understanding of ancient life continues to shift. But I thought that was a really interesting story, and I think if it's true, I think it both makes theropod dinosaurs, especially T-Rex, seem that much more scary, but also kind of makes them more sympathetic in a way, too, to think that they may have been that intelligent, and makes you glad that you weren't, you didn't exist at the same time as them. It definitely makes the portrayal of, say, velociraptors, etc., in Jurassic Park seem more plausible.